There have been so many cases where I've been implementing attribution models and mostly using the attribution models which are available within the ads platforms and also like your run-of-the-mill analytics tools like GA4, which everyone's using. There was a massive difference in store revenue and total attributed revenue. That's how this entire data set is built for modeling. And in terms of
Right.
what really comes out from it, you get saturation curves,
Hmm.
contribution waterfall charts or contribution charts, essentially how much each channel is contributing to the overall revenue.
You are listening to Full Funnel.
Hey, Full Funnel crew, welcome back. I'm Rohit, your resident marketing nerd and your guide to AI first strategies. Today, we are getting practical marketing measurement advice from an expert who is all about moving from clicks to causality, how to make marketing mix models and experimentation work together so that your marketing budgets can flow to what's truly driving your revenue. My guest is none other than Kishalaya Mukhopadhyay. He helps brands replace touch-based attribution with transparent MMM and testing, and then he essentially translates these results into decisions that your CFO could actually sign off on. Kishlaya, great to have you here. Quick introduction before we dig in. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what got you here to this point today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rohit. Great to be here on your podcast, and I've been following this for a while, so absolutely elated to be here. So
Awesome.
yeah, like you mentioned, I'm Kishloy, and I've been into marketing, data science, and analytics for a while now. So I've sort of graduated from performance marketing, so which puts me in two boats at the same time. So I've been into marketing, and I've also been dabbling with analytics for a while now. And while
Amazing.
doing that, I found that there's actually a need to also like really upgrade the game of marketing measurement while being within
Yes.
marketing. So that's what
Yes.
really brings me here.
Awesome, awesome. I'm definitely a fan of your content as well. A lot of great insights that you share. I think is really helpful for the community to kind of go slightly deeper than just high level strategies and stuff that typically people like me talk about. So very refreshing to see that, and yeah, amazing stuff. So let's dive a little bit about the problem itself, right? I mean, you've been in the space, you've run media, you've audited a lot of ad accounts and all kinds of attribution setups. What was that one moment that basically, maybe with your client perhaps, where you realized that this touch-based attribution system is just giving you the wrong story, right? Could you share a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like you mentioned, like there have been so many cases where I've been implementing attribution models and mostly using the attribution models which are available within the ads platforms and also like your run-of-the-mill analytics tools like
Mhm.
GA4,
Mhm.
which everyone's using. But while
Yep.
using that, I actually encountered cases where there was a massive difference in store revenue and total attributed
Mhm.
revenue, which would come from the regular attribution models from the different ads channels, and or even if
Yeah.
there wasn't a big delta, but it just didn't make sense like logically. So that's where
Yeah.
it started becoming apparent that it's not just about marketing strategies. The measurement plan has to be there, and it's about time to also upgrade the tools that we are using to measure. So that's what was a really watershed moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's the immediate red flag. Like, CMOs will just say that, hey, that's how ad platforms work. But the CFO says, hey, I have the CRM data and the bank account information, and it never really adds up, right? And so I think that's like a first red flag everyone has to be wary of. Could you maybe share a little bit more about more red flags, right? What are the common biases that you see in all these ad platform reports that basically is eating away at the growth, right? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the first problems is an over reliance on last click. And so we see that the platforms which are actually towards the end of the user's journey, they tend to
Yeah.
get obviously all the credit, and we typically know that's platforms like Google Ads, which will get most of the credit. But then, what about the other channels which are actually generating the demand? Even today, despite all the other things like data-driven attribution and so much talk about attribution, marketers are still using last click attribution, and they are coming up with the obvious answer that Google Ads is the one which is driving everything. But again, I mean, it's not to speak ill of any platform. Like every platform has its own utility. Platforms higher up on the funnel are also useful. Low down the funnel are also useful.
Yeah.
Just in what way and to what extent, that's not really captured properly by these
That's
different
right.
heuristic models. Then there's also
Yeah.
another problem, I would say, another red flag is the complete like complete elimination or a sort of omission of the fact that there are upper funnel activities as well which are impacting the later down in the customer journey. And that's
Yeah.
probably also a case of view through attribution. So most of these attribution models don't actually have any way to sort of incorporate view as also a kind of engagement. It's very click oriented, so it's not
Yeah.
just last touch base but also
100%.
extremely click oriented, so that's also a major problem.
That's right. 100%. 100%. And of course, not to mention all the offline channels like TV and radio, podcasts, even like this, very much non-trackable, right? To much extent. So let's talk about the solution itself, right? Everyone's kind of very familiar with these touch-based attribution systems, but might not be so familiar with MMM and experimentation, for example. So for them, they probably, some of them haven't even heard of it. So maybe you can give us like a layman's English MMM explanation, right? How would you break it down to a layman?
No, I mean, the main difference is that we stop relying on touch-based methodologies. So conversion tracking has a lot of problems. So we were talking about attribution models, but even before that,
Yeah,
I think one of the things that marketers need to realize, and probably have already realized to a large extent now because of all the privacy
yeah,
regulations and iOS updates and
yeah,
everything, that there are gaps in the conversion tracking process.
yes,
So this
that's
touch-based methodologies and then of course the extremely restricted rule-based attribution models together, this give a very narrow picture of reality. So
hmm
if we have to get closer to the truth, we need to rely on numbers and statistical analysis data which is not in any way tarnished and sort of which in any way is not dependent on these touch based methods. So those
that's
actually
right.
take us to traditional more foundational methods which are statistics oriented, like marketing mix modeling. These have been around for
hmm
so long, and yeah, they do require more expertise, but at the same time, once that is available to be leveraged, they can give much deeper insights.
Yeah, I think the biggest shift in the market that we're seeing today is this education process around being able to explain this uncertainty to the average marketer. Right? They're so used to deterministic click counting that this modeling concept feels a bit foreign, but it's been used for decades, right? And statistics and math, it works, right? And so the simple way I like to explain is like, if Meta goes up, if I spend more in Meta, does my sales go up, right? Simple basic analysis like that sometimes kind of helps explain the situation. So can you then tell us a little bit more about what comes out of the MMM, right? Firstly, what goes into MMM models, and then what comes out? What insights can it reveal?
Yeah, I mean, really useful insights, actionable insights. So first of all, like I mentioned, the historical data goes into the models. This can be media variables. There's a reason why we call marketing the marketing mix models, because there's media variables as well as non-media variables which impact marketing activities. So obviously, spins, clicks, impressions, these kind of data from the different channels. What we don't take in is revenue from the dashboard. That's not important here. What we take in is then other kinds of variables, like if you have any seasonality factors or if you have any promotions or offers that are going on, any data you
Right.
might have related to competition. So
hmm
this kind of data will also go in as predictors. All of
Right.
these will consist of input variables. I'm obviously oversimplifying a bit, but on the other hand, you'll also have
Right.
then the target variables which you're going to try and predict, which will be like say sales or or new customer revenue, or that sort of variable which you get from the store level or from your actual source of truth. So that's how
Mm,
this entire data set is built for modeling. And in terms of
Right.
what really comes out from it, you get saturation curves,
hmm
contribution waterfall charts or contribution charts, essentially how much each channel is contributing to the overall
Right.
revenue, to the end KPI. How much are the channels individual ROAS, what's the return on
Yeah.
investment, the ROI from each channel, and get it in the form of incrementality, because there's an element of incrementality even within MMM itself. Maybe not
That's right.
entirely, but there's definitely that element, right? So you get marginal ROAS curves as well, apart from saturation curves, like at what point,
hmm
how much for which channel, at what point really it makes sense to keep adding additional spend. And so
hmm
that basically gives you the marginal profitability from your marginal ROAS curves. So yeah,
Right.
plenty of outputs which can be incredibly insightful and actionable.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Those are the way I always see it is that modeling actually reveals a whole bunch of things that you actually need for decision making, right? Which is super important and which is super powerful as well at the same time. You mentioned all these different variables. It might be a bit overwhelming for some marketers, right? Because they might not have the data, or even maybe they just want to start somewhere. What's your rule of thumb on deciding how to keep it simple or maybe make it more complex at different times?
I think if someone just starting out with MMM, then just trying
Hmm.
out their hand for the first time, just go with a linear regression. There's no point.
Okay.
There's no need to go with a very complex model straight away.
Yeah.
Just ordinary squares. OLS is literally have built-in functions also within things like Google Sheets. That's actually going to give you a regression outputs. I'm just saying, just to familiarize yourself and to see that it's not that
That's
horrible monster that probably people think that it's going to come and get you at night.
yeah.
It's much easier than that. There's it's very intuitive. So there are built-in commands in Excel and Google Sheets like linest or even for running OLS, and then you
Yeah.
can probably graduate to the next step of just doing a little bit more comprehensive linear regression. But just start like that. Like, write down a simple equation, write down the media variables, and keep it
Hmm.
additive. Very simple linear regression, and I think that can give you a sense of satisfaction of actually coming out with really valuable stuff, and then you can take it to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. I think you share quite a bit on that, like keeping it simple, using Excel and Google Sheets to kind of get to an answer, some level of insight, right? Before you actually start investing heavily into it. Let's talk a little bit about experiments, right? Because obviously, MMM is uses historical data. The output is only as good as the historical data that you put in it, right? And so experiments, of course, is a way to kind of get the science part of it, right? If that's math, you got the science part of it. So, and marketers are actually typically quite familiar with this experimentation process, but sometimes these insights can disagree as well. What's your take on that? Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Spot on that marketers are constantly experimenting. It's just that they don't follow a process. And I think that that's where the
Hmm.
problem comes in. So when we are probably as measurement sort of people, we are talking about experimentation or testing, we are probably talking about more structured tests. So that's
Yeah.
probably the cognitive dissonance that marketers have, because they, when I approach them, for instance, for the first time, who's listening to this sort of an idea, they would say that, "Oh, we have been testing for like ages, like what's new about it?" But when I say that there is a statistical component to it, and there are like controls and assumptions that need to be validated, so all these
Yeah.
things when is brought into the mix, that's when they start feeling overwhelmed. But I think
Hmm.
once again, like when I start also showing them the value of the output, and how you can actually take wrong decisions if you're not following the really stringent methods that are there to be followed, that are meant to be abided by, then you can cause absolute havoc. So that's when they start appreciating these perspectives.
Interesting, interesting. So when you do testing, you're referring to like geo-testing, right? In essence, and maybe walk us through that. Like, what's your process around that? And also, do you use it hand in hand? How do you use it hand in hand with MMM?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so geo experimentation is one of the one of the ways, like you have control geos and test geos. So you basically choose, and in its simplest form, I'm obviously oversimplifying it a bit, but then so you will have some geos which you will choose where you will actually run a test, maybe a new campaign type that you're launching, and then
Mhm.
you withhold from actually showing the ads to other people. So there's this
Yeah.
exposed group, and there's this group which is non-exposed, and then you basically compare the two and see what's the lift essentially in the one which was
Mhm.
exposed. So in a simple nutshell, that's what's going on. So that's the geo test. Basically, there are considerations here. How do you choose those geos? And there has to be comparability and stuff. But yeah, that's probably at a more sort of advanced level. But this is basically the crux of geo experimentation.
Amazing. Yeah. I think it's now the gold standard. Everyone has it in their playbook. And I think, but obviously some countries more difficult to test than others, right? But US definitely, it's kind of like becoming the gold standard. And a lot of people are doing it like on an ongoing basis. Obviously there's a lot of risks and, the opportunity costs and stuff like that. But I think it's definitely worth a lot more to get the real insights, right? Can you share a case study? Maybe you don't have to reveal any names, but like a client case study where you've got some results out of this new measurement methodologies, like what is the lift of revenue or something like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at least two case studies that I recently talked about as well
Hmm.
elsewhere. So one was a CRO activity when there was actually
Hmm.
a change done on a website, and we were basically trying to see, the change was very simple. Like there was a change in the CTA and the
Okay.
text around it. So this was the hypothesis was that this will actually going to increase the rate of conversion for new customers as well. What we did is we went ahead and used a quasi experimental approach to test this, and the
Hmm.
result was pretty satisfying. Like we actually saw that there was a genuine statistically significant lift after this. And the advantage of using, suppose, a quasi experimental process is that you don't actually have to have real holdouts, so that way it does not sort of intervene or cause hindrance in your regular marketing activity, which is what the
Hmm.
marketers also liked a lot.
Right.
So apart from that, then there was another case which was relatively more sort of conventional geo holdout test, where
Right.
a brand which spends a lot of money on say Google ads and some other
Hmm.
platforms as well, but they had never introduced YouTube ads. So that was the first time they were introducing YouTube ads, and they wanted to know what
Okay.
geos they would want to run in. And then there was, I basically created a geolift kind of a system where I used some methodologies like clustering and all, and came up with the
Hmm.
set of geos which would be ideal to actually hold the test in, and also which ones would be the best to sort of treat them as controls. And yeah, then went ahead and measured the lift that came in new customer sales after running the YouTube campaign, and it was a success. Since then, they have actually implemented it and rolled forward the YouTube campaign itself.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I think once the marketer has they get some good results, they're hooked
Yeah.
on it after that. It becomes a part of their culture, and really they go all out. So yeah, so for those who are basically looking to get started, like with their first MMM, right? There's a lot of pitfalls. Right now, I can't tell you the number of times we've spoken to clients and they don't have their data house in order and all kinds of issues like that. Could you maybe give them a high level rundown on what should they think about from a data perspective? And then from a strategy perspective, right? Like not all data can be applied for every single use case, right? Or every single modeling scenario. So can you perhaps give like a high level advice on how to think about the data prep and how to then think about the strategy behind what data based on the data that you have and the goals you want to achieve?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the first things that marketers or even brands who are not yet using these kinds of measurement approaches,
Mhm.
they should start thinking about centralizing data. I think that's one of the first things that I found in the form of challenges. Like there are a lot of brands which are spending a significant amount of money, maybe even close to a million or more, or just near about, but they are not having a centralized system. They don't have a centralized collection of data like in a data warehouse. That is a very important step, because otherwise what happens is you have to do it manually, download the data from multiple sources, combine them. It's a really messy process. So that initial stage is a little bit of a hassle, I know, when you have to get the data into data warehouse. You have to choose things like what connectors to use and stuff. So there is
Okay.
that element to it, but I think that's an important step. What
100%.
there's a costing element and things like that they will have to deal with. But beyond that, I think then comes the point, how what to actually do with the data. And the advantage of having centralized data is that you can do so many kinds of analysis, and you can have
Yeah.
micro analysis leading up to your ultimate goal of doing mmms. So that's a great place. Like you can actually connect all the data sources together and blend them together to get a broader picture. So I think the data warehouse kind of a thing is
Yeah.
or any way of centralizing your data is a great first step. The second step is to actually have like a system of doing this mmm and refreshing the model, like sort of periodically, and also sort of
Yes.
back it up with some sort of tests to see how these two are going to hand in hand. So that sort of a measurement plan in place should be done like every quarter at least, or maybe even longer, depending on the
Mhm.
brand and the specifics. So I think if these two things are done more or less, I think brands will be in a much better position to have a much more strategic and scientific approach to measurement.
100%, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you're mentioning brands spending 1 million. We've seen brands like doing over 100 million still are saying, "Hey, can I share my Excel sheet with you?" And yeah, they don't have a data warehouse, and it's quite scary. But yeah, definitely that's step number one is get your data house in order so that when the time comes to modeling and also refreshing the data, all of data is synced and ready to go, right? And one of the most common questions I get is, what happens when you scale both channels, right? You scale Google and Facebook, or maybe, TikTok and Meta, whatever it might be. How do you actually separate the effects of these two channels, right? in essence a multicollinearity problem, right?
Yeah, right. So multi-criminality is an issue which will just is it's a nagging issue,
Yeah.
and it's one of the first steps while doing EDA that I faced while doing modeling. That you'll find out what's the variance inflation factor and stuff like that, and just try to understand what to then do with it. To
Hmm.
be honest, there is actually no fixed blueprint. I think that's
Yeah.
also both scary and kind of sort of fun at the same time. Every data set,
Yes.
I think, presents a separate challenge, how to deal
Hmm.
with multicollinearity, and actually whether you combine variables, look for interaction effects, or maybe even some rare cases drop variables. So
Yeah.
that challenge is there, and that's something that brands will have to deal with. It's very natural, because when you see that things are going good, or when you expect things to be going doing good, it'll probably just increase spends in all the channels, right? All your main channels. That's
That's right.
natural, and you'll also see some
Very common.
rise in revenue as well. But I think there are that's where also testing helps, right? When you can isolate
Yeah.
the effects through individual tests and through causal modeling, that's where
Yeah.
it can really sort of augment and complement the overall process.
100%, 100%. We always encounter people. We give so much recommendations, but they are like, "No, I have to do this right now in a different way than what's recommended," and then we end up not getting the result that we want, and so on and so forth. But yeah, so yeah, let's talk about the actioning. So we've spoken about the modeling. So now the actual outcomes, right? So now you have the model. Model's in a good place. It looks accurate. It's forecasting well. The CFO and the board itself is not interested in that, right? They're all about the actual revenue. They're paying for the outcomes. So what's your method to basically talking to the business leader, right? What do you put in front of them? How do you explain the model outputs to them?
Yeah, I always start with the ROAS numbers and contribution charts. So
Okay.
we already have from basic data analysis from the EDA stage itself, like how much they are spending. So contribution in terms of spends, like the percentage of spend for different channel, as opposed to the contribution that we see from the output in terms of
Hmm.
how much they contribute to the revenue per channel. So
Yeah.
if there's a mismatch in there, that's also an easy way to approach. Like, you're spending
Hmm.
35% on Google, but you're getting, like, the model is predicting only 10% is coming from as a contribution to revenue. So there is a
Hmm.
mismatch there, you need to revisit, and I think that's usually a number that they will intuitively react to, because they immediately think that's actually wasting my money.
Yeah.
So follow the money. I think that's the strategy when talking to people of C-suite stature. And the next is
Yeah.
also the ROAS and ROI factor, that you're spending so much on a channel, you'd probably be much better off going for a channel which has a better ROI. But then there's also marginal ROAS, which has to be taken into account. So I kind of follow these steps, and usually, at least, it's not always easy. Of course, there's always a lot of pushback, and a lot of complications. Different kinds of stakes are involved. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I try my best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you think about the language that marketers and finance need to speak, they got to speak the language of business, right? So that common
Right.
language that they can all work towards, and sometimes it comes very naturally to CFOs as well. Like once you explain to them, break down the concepts in a straightforward manner, they can definitely pick it up, right? Awesome. So yeah, so let's give our audience a little bit of a takeaway, right? For those who are interested in basically testing their first MMM or even running their first geo experiment, let's give them something to action, right? Let's say a mid-market brand, who's starting from scratch. What's your first like 90-day playbook? What would you advise them? Maybe walk them through your process so that they kind of understand how you do your thing.
Yeah, so like I said, the first step would be always to collect data from the different sources, get them ready, and
Yeah,
put them into a warehouse. No matter how long it takes, that's your first step. Call it the
yeah,
-5 step or something, and then you come to the zeroth point. Really,
yeah.
that's very important. And then you go to the data cleaning process. I think that's a very
Mhm.
important part of the process, whether you're doing it in the warehouse or whether you're doing it elsewhere. I think that's very important. The data should be very cleaned, because I
Yeah.
think that's a major step. Like, I'll give you an example. So mid market, so maybe they're probably advertising or selling products in multiple countries, or at least multiple states. So, but these
Mhm.
states will have different levels of activity, right? So not every state will have the
Yeah.
same level of spends and out, like, sales. So what's going to happen is going to have sparse data for different for many dates as well, like lots of zeros and missing values. So that really messes up things a lot. And and a lot of these open source models, by the way, they actually don't like such messiness in the data. They want that to be clean, otherwise you will literally, the
Yeah.
models will fail to converge.
Yeah.
That kind of importance. So, but in any case, like, that is a very important step. So EDA should like be ideally 50%, I don't know, of the total time spent behind the modeling
Yeah.
process. The next should be to actually look at important factors like, dealing with outliers, and which is
Mhm.
also part of EDA, but sort of, going back again and ensuring that you are dealing with a relatively clean set and handling multicollinearity with elegance. So these
Mhm.
should be like a very early stages of the process. And once you have a clear idea about how the different distributions look like, how they're moving together, then maybe a decision about what kind of model that will just work best. And finally moving towards, once that's executed, towards actually automating, setting up an automation process where the data refresh or the model refresh process can be carried out. So I think these are broadly, in
Interesting.
broad strokes, would be the steps involved.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great advice, and perhaps also some idea on how to upskill, right? Because I think it's important that beyond just setting out to do that playbook, they got to kind of learn a little bit more about some financial literacy, some modeling literacy. What's your advice on how to upskill? Do you have like a go-to resource or a learning process?
I mean, for me, it's like there's already a lot of good content out there,
Yeah,
so you can just go
watch
ahead
your
and,
LinkedIn channel.
I'll try to. Yeah, absolutely. Like, do follow my LinkedIn channel, or yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, YouTube channel, whatever. But
yeah,
there's ton of good content on YouTube, and there's a lot of good blogs. And yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
absolutely, just dive into it. I'll say on the internet, there's stuff to go on, go into. But yeah, it's about just the willpower and the effort.
Definitely, definitely. I think everyone also has to kind of build this test and learn culture or experimentation culture internally as well, to be comfortable with uncertainty, and the need to continuously learn and continuously optimize, as opposed to trying to just fix it once and then set it and forget it kind of motion, right? Amazing. So let's talk about the future. Everyone's favorite tool, AI, but not future, the present. Where do you see AI currently fit into your like measurement workflow, or even the other people's measurement workflows?
Yeah, I think AI is very much here to stay. It's not a passing fad, and I think it's
Yeah,
already creating ripples. So there are two sides to it. The way I see it, one is a hype, which I think is just like, as the name suggests, it's just a hype, which is
yeah,
to, talk about extremely, bold and tall claims about what it can and can't do. But on the other
yes,
side is its real capabilities, and I think it has got really powerful capabilities of automating a lot of, grunt work, a lot of tedious work, which
yeah,
honestly does not require a lot of intelligence. It's just about repetitiveness. So I think
that's
that's
right.
like a next frontier of technologies, and something that companies and people have to adopt, and doing that will only make them more efficient. Not doing so means that they're at a risk of falling behind. So to that extent, it's already a part of my own workflow as well. Like, I use
Right.
prompts and prompt engineering to really speed up the process, and
Mm,
sometimes even sort of as a helper to help me with code. But the whole point
nice.
is that you should know what you want. I mean, there should be absolute
Yeah,
clarity. You can't be like, hey, ChatGPT, build an MMM model for me. I
yeah,
mean, that's going to, I keep saying this a lot, but that's just going to be a case of garbage in, garbage out. You need to
yeah.
prompt it properly. You need to know what you want, and then AI is going to be your best friend.
Absolutely. I think it's the best assistant you can have. And if you know how to use it well, it can just 10x your output as a person. And what's your take in terms of where this is going, right? Because it's getting better every day. Every day there's a new model and new kind of way of solving things. Do you think it's going to, take over the whole marketing and measurement space?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just have to wait and
You
watch, I
have a
guess.
job in 2 years. That's
Yeah,
the question.
exactly. But yeah, I mean, what I'll do is I'll just keep upskilling and try and sort of always stay ahead of the curve, or at least not ahead of AI's curve. AI is obviously always going to be a few steps ahead of us, but sort of
Yeah,
always be right there in terms of what's required. So I think that that's the
amazing.
best one can do, and it will be pretty crazy, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be very interesting times ahead. Awesome, man. Let's move on to the lightning round. So, quick, short answers I have for you, some questions I have for you. So, what's a KPI that you check before coffee?
That would be ROAS, incremental ROAS.
Nice. What's the most overrated marketing metric today?
That would be ROAS.
Was
It's evil to
yeah,
win.
definitely. What's your go-to favorite experiment design for like quick and fast signal?
That would be a holdout test, a geo holdout test.
Nice, nice. And what's the AI tool that you've been geeking out with this quarter?
No, I'm still with Claude and with Cursor, and yeah, they're
Nice,
just still giving me great results for building new stuff.
amazing. I love Cloud Code. Although I'm not a technical person, but yeah, amazing things you can achieve with it. And one final quick win and takeaway for the brands who are still stuck in last click. What would be your advice?
Just look beyond clicks. There's a whole world to explore beyond clicks, and
Yeah.
you just missing a huge part of the whole puzzle. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So just dive
Yeah.
deeper, and you will explore and discover a lot more.
Amazing, amazing. That's great advice, Kishlai. So that's a wrap for this edition of the Full Funnel Podcast. Kishlai, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit more about MMM experiments
Thank
and
you.
sharing your great knowledge. To everyone listening, if you found this chat to be interesting, please hit follow and subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and share this with a teammate who might find it useful. Please also do follow Kishlai on LinkedIn. He shares some very deep insights and on measurement, and it's a great way to learn about how to do the next step in your journey. We'll be back next week with another guest pushing the boundaries of AI driven growth. Until then, keep testing, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next full funnel. Thanks, Kishoy. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks, Rohit.
Bye.